Without any further ado, I give you Congressman Dr. Ron Paul. Give it up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What a delight. Now, I think everybody here knows the condition of Washington, D.C. Let me tell you, I could use some help, so send John up to D.C. for me. Now, not only would that be a victory and a pleasure for me to work with John in the Congress, but, you know, if he wins, I think a lot of people are going to notice, not in San Francisco, but the whole country, the whole world will hear about this. So let's hope things go well for him this fall. No, it's great to get a nice crowd out and talk about peace and why we don't need war. We have too much war against the American people, and something has to be done. War is not a good idea, it's a bad idea. It was a couple years ago, probably in 07 or 08, I was asked on national television about the technique of, they knew I wanted to bring the troops home. They said, but how would you do this? It's so complicated. What would you do? So my solution was, we just marched in, we can just march out. Whether we're fighting unconstitutional wars overseas or fighting idiotic, unconstitutional wars against the people on the drug issue, it all adds up to being a racket, and it's against the people. It does not preserve liberty in any way whatsoever. We talk about a revolution. I believe this country is in the midst of a revolution. I believe it's a philosophic revolution, and that's the only kind that count. And we are in a position now, I think 3 years out, and we are in a lot better shape than we were 3 years ago. Our numbers are growing. I thought the campaign essentially would be over when the campaign ended, but with the campaign for liberty and all the other things that have gone on, we find out that our numbers are growing. So you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there, and I'm delighted to see everybody here today. I'd like to talk a little bit about the state of the Republic. The state of the Republic, if you're in Washington, D.C., and you look at what's happening, and if you look at what Washington, D.C. is doing to you and your friends and your neighbors and family, I would say that it looks like the Republic's in bad shape. But if you want to look for some positive things, if you look at the number of people who have opened their eyes, have decided to look at what's going on, especially the young people of this country, who not only are interested in their personal liberties, they have an interest in economic liberty, and they're very interested in doing something about getting rid of the Federal Reserve System. So the revolution is alive and well and growing. There are a few questions that comes up about the revolution. Sometimes people join the revolution just because they know where the momentum is. And sometimes they want to be in charge of the revolution and pass out the same pablum that's been passed out before. So it is up to us, those of us who have thought about it, and you who helped to build and start the revolution, make sure that we have our changes, that we have real changes, and that we don't endorse the nonsense that's going on, that if you're for limited government, you're not for limited government in economic issues, and yet be for big government around the world. They're totally inconsistent. We have to face up now with wars overseas and wars against the people, wars on drugs, wars on drugs, and the whole bit. It's endless, and it's always a threat to our liberty and confiscates what is happening. You know, the whole problem, I think, so often is language. Because I have never heard of a congresswoman or a congressman go to their district and say, you know what, I really believe in big government. I really believe in raising your taxes. I really believe in printing money endlessly so we have inflation. They never do that. Most candidates go and they talk our language. And it can be a little bit annoying because sometimes they're believed. But our job is to make sure that we know what they really have done in the past and what they really believe, because words aren't worth much if they don't stand behind them, and I think that is our job. I don't think we can get very far unless we talk about the role of government. That's where we have to start. The Founding Fathers understood rather clearly what the role of government ought to be. And they believed in the way they talked and wrote and wrote the Constitution was they believed that the purpose of government was to protect liberty. That was the purpose. It wasn't there to regulate our lives. It wasn't there to police the world. It wasn't there to tell everybody how to spend their money and what they have to take into their bodies. They were there to protect liberty. The Constitution, if you read it carefully, it's so clear. It has nothing to do with restraining peaceful activity of individuals. Nothing. It's essentially a document written for the purpose of limiting the government. That is what it's for. And then the little bit of government they were conceding to, they were advising and they wrote down where this power of government, the authority of government would be. And basically, very little of it was supposed to be in Washington, D.C. It was supposed to be more local. But now it's been turned on its head. We have government getting bigger in Washington, and it's intrusive throughout the country. But the revolutionary spirit we have today, actually, it's rather delightful. We're actually talking about nullification and the 10th Amendment once again. But you hear often on TV, if you happen to listen to a liberal commentator, they come down real hard on you if you believe in nullification. That's some right-wing, wild conspiracy theory about just nullifying laws. What do you mean? Yeah, like California would like to nullify the laws against smoking marijuana. So the nullification principle, I think, is a good one. You know, it was also intended by the founders. Actually, the principle of secession was based into the Constitution, and the Northeast always threatened to secede from the terrible South, and that was there. But you know, you can believe in the principle of secession and nullification without undermining our whole system. It's the idea that if we're mistreated or overtaxed and overregulate and fight too many wars, that we have that option. That would put so much brakes on the federal government if they understood that. I have in the past talked a lot about foreign policy. I want to talk about that a little bit because very simply, I believe in a non-interventionist foreign policy. Mind our own business. The Constitution gives us no authority to go around the world and police the world. And sometimes when I get on a conservative station, they start pushing me about this radical extreme isolationism. I said, well, I just support George W. Bush's foreign policy when he was a candidate in the year 2000. You know, when he says a humble foreign policy and no nation building and don't police the world. That's what they say to appease the people, but then once they get in, they do something else. I think too often what happens, we have Republicans and Democrats fighting back and forth, and they're real fights over power, not over your liberties, over principle, because if you get a Democrat in or a Republican in at the administrative level, they generally endorse with vengeance the Federal Reserve System, the tax system, and the foreign wars. That's what we have to put a brake on and break that up. Our foreign policy today has led us to having 13,000 special ops individuals around the country because we have a world war. It's global. It's a global war on terrorism. And they're always saying, you know, the Taliban did this, the Taliban did this. And, of course, it isn't the Taliban that, you know, came here in 9/11, so it's just an excuse to go. But we have 13,000 special ops. You know what their main job is? Assassination. I mean, this is despicable of what is happening. And not only that, these individuals go out and they do target individuals. And they shoot them and they kill them because they're leaders. They're leaders of the Taliban. You know, the Taliban was the Mujahideen in the 1980s, and we were allies, and bin Laden was on our side at that time. But now we're targeting them and shoot them. Then they wonder why they hate us. They say they hate us for our freedoms and our prosperity. That is not believable. But now that we have a foreign policy where we have CIA agents running the bombing missions with drones, and we have special ops individuals assassinating certain individuals, that we also live in an age coming out of the last administration, and that's a foreign policy on war, because now they claim it is legitimate. It's the American position. It's the Bush doctrine of preventive war. Preventive war doesn't sound quite as bad as aggression, but it is aggression when you go and start wars and start killing people because you don't like somebody. And then tell the American people, of course, oh, we're doing this because we're protecting you. But I think what is happening, not only with our group, and in the Campaign for Liberty, but across the board, I think the people, the healthy thing about the Tea Party movement is it isn't that it's monolithic and everybody agrees on everything, except for one thing. They don't trust the government anymore, and they want something much different than what we're getting today from Washington. Last week I put out a press release, and because I felt motivated to do so, and I was surprised how much coverage it got. And that had to do with the Islamic center that they're building in New York. And I thought it was a time to make the point, you know, conservatives should be more protective of property rights and, of course, First Amendment rights. And also, though, the strongest point I wanted to make was this was contrived, not by everybody who supported the position that they shouldn't build this Islamic center there. This actually isn't even a mosque. It's a convention center type thing. So what they wanted, the most important thing I thought was if they could prevent it, that means Islam is guilty. That was the goal, is to say Islam is guilty, because if they don't have enough hatred in this country built up to have an enemy, they can't justify these wars. And I hear too often people coming to me, how can you take this position? Congressmen will come to me. They want to kill us, and they're evil. They hate Christianity. They hate capitalism. And they go on and on. So they have to have an enemy. They have to have a Hitler to attack. So that's why I thought it was so important to point out that Islam has very, very, very little to do with 9/11. Al-Qaeda had a lot to do with it, and our foreign policy had a lot to do with it as well. You know, on the issue of economics, that's a war on our wallets, and that's continuous. And they have direct taxation, but they have the invisible taxation of inflation. Some people say the poor people never pay taxes. They pay Social Security taxes. That's a big hunk. But they are really the ones that suffer the most from the inflation tax. We run up the spending. We borrow a bunch. We still don't have enough. The Fed prints some money.